Về ngày ngủ nó có ngày không?
And the Edinburgh Festival. But today, we're going to look at a lot more that you might not know about. Actually, a lot of these are not exactly festivals, but strange races or competitions. Some of them are ancient, and some are modern. So, let's start in January in the north of Scotland with the burning of the clavey. This is a whiskey barrel which is set alight, then carried through the streets as a bonfire. It's an ancient tradition which always takes place on the 11th of January, the first day of the year, according to an older form of the calendar. The bonfire brings good luck for the coming year, and people used to keep bits of burnt wood as protection against evil spirits. At the end of January, even further north, in the Shetland Islands, there's another fire festival, the Up Helly Ah. This seems like an ancient festival, but has actually only been going for about 130 years. Well, it is fairly old, I suppose. People carry fire-lit torches and a Viking boat through the streets, then set fire to the boat. There's lots of dancing. It's good fun. Now, to the north of England. On Shrove Tuesday in February, otherwise known as Pancake Day, a special pancake bell is rung in Scarborough. Everyone goes down to the road next to the beach where they skip. Yep, they jump over long ropes, up to 15 people to one rope.
Whoa!
And they have pancake races. This is quite common in the UK, running with a frying pan and tossing a pancake at the same time. Another kind of race takes place in spring, cheese rolling. In Gloucestershire, in the southwest of England, round cheeses in round boxes are sent rolling down a hill, and people run after them and try and catch them. The hill is very steep, so people often fall over. If you take part in this, you need to be very fit and wear your oldest jeans. Nowadays, this strange custom attracts visitors from all over the world, but the people from the local village are usually the ones who catch the cheese. From people racing to animals, very tiny animals. World Championship snail racing takes place in a village in Norfolk. The snails have to race from an inner circle to an outer circle, and the winner gets a lot of lettuce. There's a party and barbecue for the snail owners and observers. This custom began in the 1960s after a local man saw something similar in France. In the UK, we don't eat snails, by the way.
Right. Planning breaks. Plan your study periods in chunks with regular breaks. Many people recommend half an hour of concentrated study, then a 10-minute break. But you can adjust this to suit you. If you study for too long at a stretch, your mind will work less effectively. So be careful. In your short break, you can give yourself a treat, such as a cup of green tea. Well, I wouldn't advise a chocolate bar as a treat. A sugar rush is not great for concentration. Okay, so next let's think about what you do when you're studying. Some people just read through their notes or textbooks and underline in pencil or highlight important bits. If this works for you, fine. But I'd suggest that it's better to write notes of some kind, so your mind is processing the information more. This way, you are also producing material which will be useful for last-minute revision. I don't recommend very last-minute revision, by the way, but we'll come back to that later. Have a look at these examples of student notes. Which do you think are best? The first person has written important phrases at random. The next has a table with clear headings and boxes with notes. The next has summaries. And the last one has mind maps. You've got the main topic in the circle, then lines coming off the circle attached to subcategories, then more lines to further details. Mind maps are great for showing the connections between different bits of information. They seem to work in the same way the brain works. So, what do you think? To me, the first one wouldn't be very useful to come back to and use in the future. But the others are all fine. It depends on your personal preference. Mine is for mind maps. I would suggest using colours, though, and even little drawings. They can make things much more memorable. Obviously, when you are studying, the first thing to think about is whether you understand the information. And the second thing is how you are going to remember it. Let's look at some more ways of making information more memorable.
Hello, and welcome to this recording brought to you by the British Council.
Rainforests Rule by Julie Bray. A world like no other. Perhaps this is the best way to describe the world of the rainforest. No rainforest is exactly the same, yet most rainforests are now distributed in the small land area 22.5 degrees north and 22.5 degrees south of the equator, between the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer. You can find tropical rainforests in South America and Indonesia. Other rainforests flourish further from the equator, in Thailand and Sri Lanka. Despite occupying a relatively small area, rainforests have a colossal role to play in maintaining the world as we know it. Tropical rainforests are home to a rich, colorful variety of medicinal plants, food, birds, and animals. Can you believe that a single bush in the Amazon may have more species of ants than the whole of Britain? 480 varieties of trees may be found in just 1 hectare of rainforest. These forests sustain around 50% of all the species on Earth and offer a way of life to many people living in and around the forest. Rainforests are the lungs of the planet, storing vast quantities of carbon dioxide and producing a significant amount of the world's oxygen. Rainforests have their own perfect system for ensuring their own survival. The tall trees make a canopy of branches and leaves which protect themselves, smaller plants, and the forest animals from heavy rain, intense dry heat from the sun, and strong winds.
Nhìn xuống cái ban của nhìn xuống cái ban kìa thôi ạ. Thôi cũng không mệt lắm. Ở đây là lạnh. Em đi ra. Đi hẹn em 8 phút rồi.
Bắt đầu lộ trình đến phường Hội An để báo cáo các va chạm hoặc các sự cố khác bạn hãy dọc đường. Hãy chạm vào mũi tên với màn hình.
Chị hỏi của cô nào. Hỏi Tư ra rằng đến Hội An là bao nhiêu vé?
Now turn to part 3. You will hear 3 different talks or lectures. In each talk or lecture there are 5 questions. For each question, choose the correct answer A, B, C or D. You will hear the talks or lectures only once. Now open your questions paper and look at talk or lecture 1. You now have 35 seconds to look through the questions and the options in each question.
Thế thì bạn kiểm cô ta đi bán rồi 42 điểm nhá.
Em thử nhá.
Thôi cô đi chơi.
Thử em. Cô ấy nhưng mà
Thấy bạn đi lắm ấy.
Now we are ready to start. Listen carefully.
If you want to take an undergraduate course of study, you require a letter of recommendation from your principal and copies of your school records and exam results. You must, of course, demonstrate ability to communicate effectively in English. Different majors require different abilities in English. Undergraduate courses in science often require you to do a foundation year before you start the course, so that you achieve the requisite knowledge before you begin the courses. Degrees generally last 3 years, though the first year doesn't count towards your final marks. Application is always via UCAS, an organization that handles all undergraduate students. Postgraduate application is via direct application to universities. They will require a minimum pass in your degree, certainly above average, and as with undergraduate courses, require a minimum level in your English ability. Most master's courses take 1 year, but some take 2, so be sure to take this into account when choosing. There are 2 systems of ranking, for universities' overall achievement and for each of their separate departments. Other kinds of information are available, like graduate employment statistics. Generally, British universities are generally respected globally, and there is an international ranking system that lists all the top universities in the world for you to check where your university places.
Now open your question paper and look at talk or lecture 2. You now have 35 seconds to look through the questions and the options in each question. Now we are ready to start. Listen carefully.
My name's Dan Pearman, and I'd like to talk about the work of Pedal Power, a small charity based mainly in the UK. I'll be giving our contact details at the end, if anyone would like to find out more about how to support us. But first, how the charity began. I got the idea of exporting bicycles to developing countries while I was in Ecuador. I went there in 1993, just after graduating from university. After 3 years of studying, I wanted adventure. I loved traveling, so I decided to join a voluntary organization and was sent to Ecuador to carry out land surveys. The project came to an end after 5 years, and when I returned to the UK in 1998, I started planning Pedal Power. Where I lived in Ecuador was a very rural area. My neighbor had the only bicycle in the village, whereas everyone else walked everywhere. My neighbor's business was unusually successful, and for years I couldn't understand why. Then I realized having a bike meant he could get where he wanted to go without much trouble. Other local carpenters could only accept jobs in a 3-kilometer radius, so no matter how skilled they were, they could never do as many jobs as my neighbour. At Pedal Power, we collect second-hand bikes in the UK and send them to some of the poorest regions in the world. When we distribute bikes overseas, we don't give them away for free. We'd like to, but long-term that doesn't really help the local economy. The demand for bikes is enormous, which makes them very expensive locally. So we sell them for 5% of the normal price. But in order to continue operating, we need to have a constant supply of bikes which we send out every 6 months. One example of a town that's received bicycles from Pedal Power is Rivas. It was the first place I sent a full container of bicycles to. Most people there now own a bicycle. The local economy has developed so much, you wouldn't recognize it as the same place. In fact, there are more bikes than on the streets of Amsterdam, if you've ever been there. But Pedal Power still needs your help. You may have read about some of our recent problems in the British media. In August 2000, we simply ran out of money. We had containers of bikes ready to send, but no money to pay the bills. It was a terrible situation. We managed to ensure the bikes went out on time, but the other problems carried on for several months.
Now open your question paper and look at Talker Lecture 3. You now have 35 seconds to look through the questions and the options in each question.
Chỗ hóa muốn mà đẹp đi. Đồ câu rong nó phải nó phải mua hóa nó để mua thôi. Rồi đấy câu sông Han á. Đến dọc đường Trần Hưng Đạo.
Now we are ready to start. Listen carefully.
Để mua thôi.
Today's Health Council is presented by Paula Clayburgh, who is the Chief Counsellor at Liverpool's famous pain clinic, the Wilton Clinic. Paula.
Do you know what Prince Charles, Sevi Ballesteros and Elizabeth Taylor have in common? They all suffer from chronic back pain. In fact, bad backs are one of the most common health problems today, affecting people in all walks of life. The most recent available figures show that about 250,000 people are incapacitated with back pain every day. And many sufferers don't know the cause or the solution to their problem. The majority of our patients at the clinic tend to be women. They are especially vulnerable because of pregnancy, but also because of osteoporosis, which I personally believe to be the major cause of problems for women. I have many women patients who say they have completely given up exercise because the pain makes them so miserable. But of course, that starts up a vicious circle. Bed rest, giving up exercise, and painkillers are traditional responses to back pain. But although there are many excellent drugs on the market, at our clinic, we're beginning to realize the unique benefits of relaxation therapy. Other specialists in the field make a strong case for certain types of exercise, but in our experience, they are easily mishandled and can lead to more harm than good. Now let's look at some of the reasons why back pain is developing into such a unique menace. In general, the body is pretty good at self-repair. A strain or a blow to a limb, though painful at the time, generally resolves itself. But the body's response to back injury can be very counterproductive. When pain strikes, we attempt to keep the back as immobile as possible, which makes the muscles tense up. Research shows that they often go into spasm, which causes further twisting of the spine. A vicious circle is underway. The second mistake we often make when stricken with extreme back pain is to go to bed and stay there. Although at the clinic, we recognize that a short rest in bed can be helpful, up to 2 days, any longer makes our back muscles become weaker and unable to hold up our spine. The pain, therefore, becomes worse. Another problem is being overweight. Anyone a stone or more overweight who already has back pain is not doing himself any favors. Though it won't actually set it off in the first place, the weight will increase the strain and make things worse. The British diet could be partially to blame for the increase in back pain.
That is the end of part 3. Now you have 5 minutes to check your answers and transfer your answers onto the answer sheet.
Chưa từng ngồi án.
Ui, phổi tôi bụt đấy câu rong anh đi.
Đấy, thằng bánh.
Nó biết đi mua lớn ạ. Con mua ạ. Con hồi án lên chút xíu.
Part 3. Questions 21 to 35. In this part, you will hear 3 talks or lectures. There are 5 questions for each talk or lecture. For each question, choose the correct answer A, B, C or D. You will hear the talks or lectures only once. Questions 21 to 25. You will hear a talk about commercial waste.
Còn tinh châu đi để chúng đây đi. Cái đó ngồi đi.
Japan begins commercial whaling after 30 years. This is breakingnewsenglish.com. Japan has resumed commercial whaling after a hiatus of over 3 decades. Commercial whaling was banned in 1986 by an International Whaling Commission IWC moratorium. However, Japan withdrew from the IWC in December. Japan's government has promised all whalers will stay within 320 kilometers from its coast. The Japanese Fisheries Agency set a quota for killing 227 whales every 6 months. In the first days of resumed whaling, whalers caught 2 minke whales, which were taken to the northern port of Kushido. The whale meat was auctioned in Tokyo and sold for record prices. Eager restaurant owners snapped up the meat at prices of up to $140 per kilo. Japan has engaged in the practice of whaling for centuries. Whale restaurant chef Mitsuo Tani summed up why he thought the return of commercial whaling was important. He said, "A country that does not preserve its food culture has no future." He also promoted the health benefits of whale meat. He said, "It is 5 times lower in calories than beef, 10 times lower in cholesterol, 2 times less fat than chicken, and it's packed with iron." But abroad, people do not know this. However, Japan's return to whaling has brought international outcry. The Humane Society accused Japan of starting a new and shocking era of pirate whaling. It added, "This is a sad day for whale protection globally." This is Eric Carroll reporting from Yokohama, Japan.
Questions 26 to 30. You will hear a talk about zero cabin fuel.
Rửa lại không? Năm này bỏ lại kém. Nó đồn được rồi đó. Nhanh lên. Con sổ mũi cố.
Zero carbon power bigger than fossil fuels in UK.
This is BreakingNewsEnglish.com. The United Kingdom has said it is playing its part in striving for a cleaner and greener planet. For the first time since the Industrial Revolution in the 18th and 19th centuries, the UK is being powered more by zero-carbon fuels than fossil fuels. In each of the first 5 months of 2019, fossil fuels have produced less than half of the UK's electricity. Analysts say a tipping point has been reached, and the trend of zero-carbon energy sources providing more power than fossil fuels will continue. Power from wind, solar, nuclear, and hydro sources outstripped coal and gas-fired generation. A decade ago, 3/4, 75.6% of the UK's electricity came from coal and gas, and only 22.3% was zero carbon. The switch to more zero-carbon power was described by the UK's Energy Chief Executive as a key milestone on the journey towards net zero. CEO John Pettigrew said the zero-carbon share should increase to 90% by the 2030s. The UK's Prime Minister Theresa May has made a commitment to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. This would make the UK the first major economy to do so. Energy analyst Tom Burke told the BBC, "Today's landmark is a real tribute to technologists. We have cracked technical problems of dealing with climate change." He added, "As we move towards net zero, jobs will be lost in fossil fuel industries and created in low-carbon industries." This is Jack Rigg reporting from Richmond, British Columbia.
Questions 31 to 35.
You will hear a talk about Saturn.
Saturn now is the planet with the most moons. This is BreakingNewsEnglish.com. Astronomers have promoted Saturn as the planet with the most moons. Saturn has overtaken the solar system's largest planet, Jupiter, as King of the Moons. The astronomers recently discovered 20 new moons orbiting Saturn, which brings the planet's total number to 82. This edges out Jupiter with 79 celestial bodies into second place. Each of the newly discovered moons are at least 5 kilometers in diameter. 17 of them orbit Saturn backwards and take more than 3 years to complete one orbit of Saturn. The astronomers found the moons using the powerful Subaru telescope located on Hawaii. The research team will now look for moons that are around a kilometer in diameter. Lead astronomer Dr. Scott Shepard commented on the perceived origins of the new moons. He said, "We don't think they formed with the planet. We think they were captured by the planet in the past." He posited that Saturn sucked in a swirling mixture of gas and dust to form the moons. Dr. Shepard added, "We think these moons interacted with that gas and dust. These were comets or asteroids that happened to be passing by. They were captured into orbits around the planet rather than falling into the planet. We think these are the last remnants of what formed Saturn. The moons will be named in a competition after giants from Gaelic, Inuit, and Norse mythology." This is Cynthia Jones reporting from Vancouver, Canada.
I'm so sorry.
That is the end of part 3.
Now, you will have 7 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet.
Hello, and welcome to this recording brought to you by the British Council. Physical Education by Richard Sidaway. School days are supposed to be the best days of your life, and part of that experience usually involves some strenuous physical activity. I asked some colleagues to give me their recollections of what happened to them on the sports field and beyond, and this is what they told me. Cup winners. When I was about 10, my friend Steve told me, the football team from our year inexplicably made it to the cup final of the local schools league. I say inexplicably because I only remember us losing nearly every match we played. Anyway, in the final, I set up the winning goal, a brilliant cross to my mate David, who headed the ball in just before the final whistle. I still have a photograph of the team holding the cup. Forest hike. Thomas said, I remember having to lead a group of 8 boys on a school expedition for the best part of 2 days when I was a teenager. Even though we got lost at one point, I managed to keep them all together and got them from one end of a large forest to the other and back by sheer force of will. I was chosen to be the leader, I think, because I was the only one who knew how to read a map. When we arrived back at the campsite, we found out that all the other groups had cheated and hitched most of the way instead. I felt a bit of a mug, but also rather proud of myself at the same time for having done it properly. Learning to swim, learning to drown. According to Lawrence, I learned to swim comparatively late, I suppose. I was maybe 9 years old, but my brother had a traumatic experience which nearly put him off for life. We lived in the USA for a while and had access to a university pool where the coaches had trained the American Olympic team. In those days, though, their idea of teaching kids how to swim was to tie a tin can to their ankles with a bit of string, throw them in the deep end and shout, "Swim!" I'm surprised my brother survived at all. He could only have been about 6 at the time. Sponsored walk. Joy said, one of my earliest physical feats was probably going on a 10-mile walk for charity when I was about 7. I went with my older brother and my dad, but they didn't make much allowance for the fact that my legs were shorter. I had to go at the same pace as them. Even so, I made it and raised quite a lot of money from school friends and teachers who had agreed to pay me for every mile I walked. Cross-country ordeal. I remember one dark, wet afternoon in February being herded out onto the school field and having to run 3 miles across country while the rain came bucketing down, my friend David told me. Soon we were all drenched to the skin, shivering with cold, and the only way to stay warm was to keep running. One of the gym teachers, who had been sitting inside having a cup of tea, came out to meet us halfway around the course and told us to jump over a stream before we could start on the home stretch. This teacher actually stood on the hands of the boys he didn't like as they were trying to climb up the muddy bank on the other side, so that they slid back down into the freezing water. I was disgusted by this, but of course I didn't say anything. I was only 12. I think it changed my view of human nature a bit after that, the fact that someone who I had previously respected could be so cynical and cruel. Dwarfed in Germany. William said, "We went on a tour of Germany one year from secondary school to play football against 3 different teams there. Everyone was violently sick on the ferry going across to Holland, and the whole thing was a bit of a farce, as the teacher who had arranged it didn't speak German very well. So we ended up playing teams who were 3 or 4 years older than us. Naturally, we got beaten every time. Climb every mountain." According to Duncan, one of my best memories of early physical endeavour was climbing Ben Nevis, which is the tallest mountain in the British Isles. It was a glorious day, which is pretty rare for that part of Scotland, and we walked up in about 5 hours. The last bit is pretty hard going, as it's a zigzag path of big stones. We took the family dog, and she had a really difficult time of it. The strangest thing was that we didn't see too many people on the way up, and then when we reached the top, it was suddenly covered with Japanese tourists. I can only presume they had been airlifted there by helicopter. Down to earth. Philip told me, "My cousins were always the outdoor adventurous types, learning how to canoe and windsurf and abseil and so on. One day, one of them climbed onto the top of the house to fix some tiles with my uncle. The next minute, he appeared at the kitchen door, a little bit dazed, and his mother, who was cooking lunch, looked at him in surprise and said, 'What are you doing here? I thought you were helping your dad.' 'I've just fallen off the roof, Mum,' he said. Apparently, he had overbalanced and toppled over backwards. Because he had recently been doing parachute training, his latest hobby, he had rolled over automatically when he hit the ground, without thinking. This was a big, old 2-story house, and he must have been at least 10 meters from the ground. But he didn't have a scratch on him." We hope you've enjoyed this recording.
We hear it a lot in the news these days. Recycle newspapers and save a tree. Collect bottles and cans so they can be reused in the manufacturing of new products. Protecting our delicate environment seems to be on the agenda of politicians, government leaders, and citizens in many parts of the world to show support for Mother Nature. The concept of green consumerism has gained momentum more and more over the last decade, and the public feels moved to pitch in and help. However, 3 essential keys need to power this movement include a more informed public, the development of improved technology, and a greater demand for recycled materials. The first step is to raise public awareness about the recycling process, to explain the kinds of materials that can be recycled, and provide ways on how to properly dispose of them. Local governments should educate the public on how to properly sort reusable materials from those like wax paper, carbon paper, plastic laminated materials such as fast food wrappers that can't be recycled very easily. Then a system of collecting these sorted materials needs to be established. The public interest might be there, but soon may wane if there isn't a system where they can take these materials to be recycled. Sometimes we become complacent when it comes to recycling, but when you speak in terms of actual facts and figures that everyone can understand, people become more cognizant of the problem. I remember reading one time that the energy saved from one recycled can provides enough power to operate a television for 3 hours. Give the public information they can grasp, and then you'll increase the chances of gaining followers. Second, technological progress has been made on many fronts, but governmental agencies need to step up their support for companies involved in recycling by providing tax incentives, low-cost loans, and even grants to upgrade equipment and to encourage further research. One breakthrough has been the development of a new manufacturing process that uses enzymes to help remove ink from paper in more energy efficient and environmentally safe methods. Recycling paper materials can be expensive in both monetary and environmental terms. The difficulty in removing print from paper, the amount of energy expended during the process, and caustic waste that is sometimes produced are costs that companies incur that are then passed on to the consumer. The final key is to increase demand for the growing surplus of resources waiting to be recycled. This process has appeared in various regions of the world where the technology to process the used materials lags far behind the amount being collected for recycling. There may be a great outpouring of support, yet the great stumbling block to implementing the second stage of this plan could be impeded by the corporate sector's inability to find commercial enterprises interested in using recycled goods, especially when the cost exceeds those of virgin materials. Recycling is a crucial key to protect our planet. The three keys mentioned are important ways to achieve this end.
Hello, and welcome to this recording brought to you by the British Council. Trains, Past, Present and Future, by John Russell. Why did railways develop? Railways are not a modern invention as most of us think. The idea of transporting things and people on rails has been around for a long time. Rails were made of wood, stone or metal, and railway wagons were pulled by horses. Some were even wind-powered and had sails. At the start of the Industrial Revolution in Britain, people needed to transport raw materials such as coal, so created a network of canals and rail links between towns. But canals and horsepower were a very slow way to move things around the country, so the speed of railway wagons needed to be increased. How did steam engines help? By 1800, many industries were using steam engines designed by James Watt, from where we get the electrical measurement, Watt. Richard Trevithick, a Cornish engineer, refined Watt's invention, and after failing to build a steam-powered road vehicle, he designed the first locomotive for an ironworks in Wales. He called it a puffer because of the noise it made, and on its first journey, it travelled at almost 8 kilometres an hour. Unfortunately, it was so heavy that it broke the rails. It only made 3 journeys. But it had shown that steam engines could be used to move trains, and speeds began to increase. When was the first accident? By 1829, locomotives were travelling at speeds of over 45 kilometres an hour, and the first public railway had been opened, the Stockton and Darlington Railway. The most famous early locomotive was the Rocket. In 1833, it won a competition organised by the owners of the Manchester and Liverpool Railway to find the best locomotive for their new line. Unfortunately, during the competition, a member of Parliament wasn't careful as he crossed the tracks, and the Rocket knocked him down. He died later. This was one of the first train accidents in history. What was the golden age of steam? The next 130 years can be described as a golden age of steam. railways were built all over the world, and the size, speed and comfort of trains continued to increase. By 1870, it was possible to cross America by train, and the building of railways in many other countries allowed people and progress to move quickly across the world. Hello, and welcome to this recording brought to you by the British Council.
Overpopulation by John Cootie. I come from the south of England, in the most densely populated corner of a small island, which you might think is full of people. The UK as a whole has 2.4 people per hectare. I have never gone hungry. The only time when I wish there were less people is on rush hour trains. However, one of the most interesting findings of the census of 2001 was that 1 million people were missing. Or at least, there were 1 million people less than the authorities expected. Should we be happy that we have more space and less mouths to feed? I don't know. As I start writing this article, the world population, according to the Office of Population Research at Princeton University, stands at 6,315,850,431. Do, version 1. In 1798, Robert Malthus wrote an essay which got economics the name of the dismal science. It was called The Principle of Population. He said that it was impossible for the number of people to increase, and even worse, it was impossible for the standard of living to rise. The argument went like this. 1. Population naturally increases geometrically.